I'm going to get to my oh, no, you don't. Ah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Graveyard. I am your host, Roger Belt, and along with me is my partner in crime, the lovely Miss Christina Corsetti.
Hello, everybody.
Hope you guys are going to enjoy this one. First and foremost, we want to honor the men who served both sides. It was a horrible ordeal, but they both served as they knew how. So, I salute all of them, either way they go. After all, we are one country again, so they're all equal in my book. Having said that, let me get over here because I want to find, of course, you all know Gettysburg is a town in Pennsylvania. It's one of the most haunted areas in the United States. During its 3 days of intense battle ending on July 3rd of 1863, more than 7,800 brave Union and Confederate soldiers lost their lives, and tens of thousands more were wounded and crippled, and some of them died afterwards. It's no wonder that hundreds upon hundreds of ghostly encounters have been reported at this National Military Park. And I will let Miss Christina start us off with the.
All right, we got the Farnsworth House Inn.
Yes, Farnsworth Inn.
The tongue twister, huh?
Farnsworth Inn.
Farnsworth Inn. The original part of the house was built in 1810. Followed by the brick structure in 1833. Before, during, and after the Civil War, the Sweeney family owned this sturdy, safe home. The retreating Confederate soldiers also noticed what a fortress this home was, and especially like the garret window in the attic, a perfect place for snipers to pick off Union soldiers on Cemetery Hill, just 100 yards away. During the 3-day bloody battle, the Sweeneys fled to safety, and a group of Confederate soldiers took positions within the home's attic. Tragically, one of the snipers' strayed bullets went through a home not far away, where Jenny and Georgia were making bread for the Union side. The bullet penetrated the ward's door, killing Jade Wade in her kitchen. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Union forces also were attracted to this fortress-like home and set up headquarters there. Sooner or later, the Sweeneys were able to move back into their home, and they probably noticed over 100 bullet marks in the southern wall of the brick addition as visitors do to it as a hospital. That's pretty interesting. The Lincoln possession passed the Farnsworth House on November 19th, 1863, on the way to the National Cemetery, where he delivered the famous Gettysburg Address. Harvey Sweeney, the owner of the house during the battle, composed a letter to his brother, penning the most insightful ever written on the subject. Now, around the turn of the century, both structures became a bed and breakfast inn, perhaps to take advantage of the people traveling to visit the Gettysburg battlefield, a place where over 50,000 men died in battle, and to visit the cemetery where perhaps friends and loved ones were buried. The inn was named for a brave Union Civil War officer, General John Farnsworth, who died along with 65 of his men, charging the right flank of the General Longstreet's Confederate position. Most of the hauntings are attached to the present and spiritual entities from Confederate soldiers that occupied, suffered, and died in the property. When the inn is quiet and no one is in the attic, the living are treated to a Jew harp concert played by an entity soldier still on duty in the attic. Footfalls are heard on the staircases and heard pacing throughout main floor. Employees have heard footsteps following them around as they tend to their duties. When they look behind them, no one is there. Invisible presences have been known to pay the living a visit by sitting on their beds. Out of the corner of your eye, the living has seen apparitions, shadows moving. At night, the living has seen in front of them shadows moving through the dining room. Now, in the restaurant part, entities have been known to rather be rude and cheeky to the waitresses. On 2 occasions, both women were turned completely around by an invisible presence who had yanked hard on their apron strings. A commonly found spiritual presence that runs between the tavern and the kitchen is that of the elderly female matron. Down the hallway, which runs between the tavern and the kitchen, a lifelike apparition of an older woman dressed in 1800s attire had been seen looking over the items stored on the shelves there. She disappeared without a trace. She had been spotted for many years, but no one's sure who she is. Perhaps she's a former mistress or a head housekeeper, maybe checking up on the supplies. So this place seems to be very haunted.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Oh. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. I was trying to pull up a picture for you, but it wasn't working too well. So anyway, a lot of people are familiar with the Devil's Den, I'm sure. It's the name given to a ridge strewn with boulders south of town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, about 500 yards west of Little Round Top. On the Battle of Gettysburg, battlefield, the origin of the name is uncertain. On July 2nd, 1863, the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, the area around Devil's Den saw intense fighting as part of General Robert E. Lee's flank attacks when Lieutenant General James Longstreet's Confederate corps attacked the divisions of Major General Daniel Sickles III, Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Some 5,500 Confederates formed Major General John Bell Hood's division, ultimately captured Devil's Den. From 2,400 defenders drawn from Major General David Bell Barney's division, it was one of the few Southern success in that day's fighting. So you got to figure, they were probably like, yeah, we got this, we captured this, on to the next, but that's not how it came out, as we all know. Total casualty estimates of over 800 for the Union, more than 1,800 among the Confederates. The location of the Devil's Den is considered one of the many haunted hotspots on the Gettysburg battlefield. And I was going to show you a picture, actually, of an apparition caught at the Devil's Den, but I couldn't pull the darn thing up. Paranormal believers and skeptics alike, there have been several reports of malfunctioning cameras, exposed film, watches, and other electronic devices in the area, sounds of disembodied footsteps, marching, cannon fire, and I used to have an EVP of an actual cannon shot from Gettysburg.
Yeah, I remember that.
Not anymore. Sounds of disembodied footsteps, marching, and cannon fire, galloping horses, and disembodied cries of soldiers who once lost their lives on this hallowed ground have been heard too many times to count. Apparitions have also been reportedly seen in this area of the battlefield, particularly the ghost of what is assumed to be a Texan soldier who looks sort of like a hippie, long hair, ragged clothes, barefoot, big flappy hat, and also the spirit of a Union soldier who seems at first to be a reenactor from the New York Regiment who enjoys posing for photos. The Union soldier will pose as they did in those days, standing with his back straight, one hand across his lower torso, and the other hand placed at his back.
Now you're not able to pull up that picture?
Yeah, I tried. I'll try again, but it's not wanting to, for some reason, it's not wanting to let me pull up my pictures, and we, we tried this and it worked before.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it's being, you know what it's being. I'm not going to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have I have some more pictures, and they're not all in the same. What in the world are you doing? We shall try this one more time, folks. See if I can get it to come up. It's not wanting to pull up the dang picture.
Okay. All right. Well, we tried, right, Roger?
Anyways.
All right. Well, you did mention Little Round Top.
Yeah.
This is one site where phantom formations are allegedly seen marching. One regularly reported apparition here is a headless horseman and unlucky officer that lost his head in a likelihood to a cannonball. He's still there rallying his troops up the hill. Well, one tale from here is from a group of foreign dignitaries who visited the battle scene. When they returned, they complimented the Rangers on the lifelike reenactment of the battle they saw, but there was no reenactment that day. Apparently they've been treated to replay the whole replay of the real thing. So basically, they saw the real reenactment, and it wasn't one that was being played. The most famous story from here is from the end of the battle reenactment. The actors still in blue uniforms were taking a break when an old man dressed in a Union private, filthy and smelling of sulfur, walked over to them. He said, "Rough one today, eh, boys?" as he shot out some musket rounds. The old trooper then turned and he just vanished. They had the musket balls checked, and they were authentic as 130 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That is cool. The phantom surgery, this to me is like, I would give an eye tooth to actually see this in person. One of the foremost authorities and authors of The Ghost of Gettysburg relates one of the area's most gruesome experiences. Pennsylvania Hall at Gettysburg College has been the site of many Civil War era ghost encounters, but perhaps none can compare to what two college administrators saw one night. 100 years ago, the building had been used as a field hospital for many of the fierce battle's wounded. But on this night, as the two administrators were taking the elevator from the south floor down to the first, the long ago nightmare wasn't even on their minds. The elevator passed the first floor and continued on to the basement. When the doors opened, the administrators could scarcely believe their eyes. What they knew to be storage space was replaced by a scene from the hospital. Dead and dying men were lying about on the floor. Blood-covered doctors and orderlies were rushing about chaotically, trying desperately to save their lives. No sound emanated from the ghostly sight, but both administrators saw it clearly. Horrified, they frantically pushed the elevator button to close the doors. As the doors closed, they said one of the orderlies looked up and directly at them, appearing to see them with a pleading expression on his face.
Now, wouldn't that be more of a residential, opening up the doors and seeing a scene?
Yeah, but not if
they notice you.
But not if you have a person there or a spirit there that looks up directly at you with a pleading face, like, "Come help us."
That's more intelligent.
That makes it a little bit more on the realistic side. Or
I tend to hear a lot about those visions that they see. They open up a door and they see this scene.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And I would have automatically said, yeah, that's a residential. But then when it says that one of the orderlies looked them dead in the eye with a pleading face, like, "Come help us,"
Yeah, because they notice you.
So maybe he's the only one that was actually the real spirit in there, and the rest of it was a residual. I don't know if that can happen, but
Yeah, it's a little that's pretty cool,
yeah. Okay, Sachs Bridge.
Sachs Bridge. All right. Well, the Sachs Covered Bridge was built in 1854 in Gettysburg, playing a role in the American Civil War. Sachs Covered Bridge is filled with rich and ghostly history. Legend has it that 3 Confederate soldiers were hung from Sachs Covered Bridge during the American Civil War. Many visitors have claimed to see full body apparitions of the soldiers, experienced strange touching and hair pulling, and heard eerie voices. There are 2 theories as to why these soldiers were hung. The first being that 3 Confederate soldiers deserted their unit and they were caught. Their punishment, hanging from Sachs Covered Bridge. The other theory suggests that the 3 soldiers were actually spies and they were hung from the bridge. So a group of paranormal investigators ventured out there to see if they could get interesting photos or recordings. While they were there, a strange fog filled the air, and the group saw lights from across the field. They then heard sounds of neighboring horses and cannon fire, which lasted for about 20 minutes. That's actually pretty long. As the cannon fired, the fog lifted. The group left the bridge, but 7 returned later that night thinking there might be more to experience. The experience got even more terrifying. They saw shadow people darting by and heard men's voices. When they heard growling and the sounds of battle, they finally left. Many people believe the bridge in the area is quite haunted. Full body apparitions, disembodied voices, cold spots, and people being touched have been reported on more than one occasion.
You see why I love this place, man?
Pennsylvania is pretty haunted.
If the good Lord's willing, and the creeks don't rise, I'm gonna go there one of these days. I'm telling you, I'm gonna go there one of these days. Screams of battle, possibly the most unnerving experience one can have at Gettysburg, is actually hearing by ear or by EVP recording the echoes of that horrific battle and its ghostly cries of pain and death. People have reported hearing battle cries and charges, followed by the agonized cries of men screaming and moaning. It can sound like people are dying all around you. Now that would be creepy. Gettysburg saw one of the bloodiest battles in our nation's history, so it is understandable that Gettysburg ghosts are so common. The Daniel Lady Farm.
The Daniel Lady Farm was used as the Confederate Army's field hospital. Soldiers who suffered from artillery wounds, a lot of chest wounds, and lost limbs were brought to the farm to recover or to suffer through their final moments of their lives. The farmhouse and barns saw their share of ghastly horror. The ghost of General Isaac Ewell and his corpse of 10,000 still reportedly haunted the farm. That would be a place to be haunted where all those people suffered, huh?
Right. Okay, Cashtown Inn, folks. A lot of people are familiar with Cashtown. That's another place I want to go. The haunted Cashtown Inn in Cashtown, Pennsylvania has been the talk of the area for many years. In the year 1797, the inn was constructed and opened for business. In the early days of the business, the individual that ran it would only accept cash as a means of paying for lodging, toll fees, and even various types of goods instead of accepting credit and bartering like so many businesses did in that time period. The locals eventually gave it the name of Cashtown due to this. Seeing that it was located on the famous Route 30, it ended up getting a lot of business. It was so popular, in fact, that the Confederate Army, headed by the General Robert E. Lee, ordered his troops to station at the Cashtown Inn until he rendered notice of the next course of action. As ordered, the Confederate Army went to the Cashtown Inn while General Lee decided on his next move. Unfortunately, he did not think that this next move would result in the many tragedies that it did. This decision ultimately ended in the infamous Battle of Gettysburg. Many men were injured that day and many men were killed. Emotions ran high and a sense of despair and dread and loss filled the air like a thick cloud of ominous events experienced and those yet to be experienced. The Cashtown Inn helped to house the soldiers and made a special area where the soldiers who were injured could be taken care of. Once the war was over, the inn continued in business as always. Unfortunately, business dwindled by the year 1948. This was largely due to the fact that the town allowed a bypass highway to be constructed. When this occurred, those that would normally pass right through the town of Cashtown would be directed around it. Quickly, business was terribly low. It was so low, in fact, that the owner could not properly maintain it. A woman by the name of Carol Buckley and her husband, Charles, finally elected to purchase the building in the year 1987. During the restoration process, there were many paranormal experiences that seemed to occur as well. Hauntings seemed to emerge at every corner of Cashtown Inn. One of the rooms where a general by the name of A.P. Hill lodged during the battle is said to be haunted. In many instances, visitors to the inn have reported that the rocking chair in the room will start to move on its own with absolutely no explanation. In addition to this, several have been frightened because of the fact that it felt as if someone was on the bed with them while they rested. Now, I don't know about you, but two's company, three's a crowd. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Many individuals who work in the inn and have visited the inn have been surprised to see a man in the hallway, also in the area of the bar. While under normal circumstances, this would not be an issue. The man that they see is transparent and is dressed in one of the old Confederate uniforms that were standard issue during the Civil War. This man has been seen in the area that is near the bar as well, and is unknown as to whether the spirit has attempted to interact with people he has shown himself to, or if he hasn't. However, the experience was frightening to the witnesses regardless, and I'm sure it was. There are many other types of unexplained events that have happened in the haunted Cashtown Inn. Employees and visitors have heard strange sounds that resemble that of someone or many people walking at once when no one else was around. Even personal belongings of some of the guests have been altered, such as suitcases being packed with no explanation. Now, when it's checkout time, if y'all want to come pack my bags, feel free. Just save me the headache. But until then, leave my bags alone. Gettysburg Hotel.
All right. The history of Gettysburg Hotel is filled with tales of eerie hauntings. A ghost of a woman has been seen dancing in the hotel ballroom. Paranormal investigators believe the spirits of Union soldier James Culbertson of Company K, Pennsylvania Reserves, still roams the hotel. A Civil War nurse known as Rachel is one of the best-known ghosts residing at the historic Gettysburg Hotel. Her apparition has been seen wandering the hotel halls and roaming the streets outside, perhaps looking for injured soldiers to tend to. Her ghost has also been known to enter the guest rooms, with reports of dresser drawers opening and clothes flying out. That's pretty cool. The ghost of a wounded soldier is another regular at the hotel, as it is a female ghost seen dancing in the ballroom. That'd be pretty cool to see your drawers open and all the stuff come flying out.
Yeah.
I like to see that.
Now, see, me, I would love something like that.
I would too.
Seeing an apparition in the hallway, seeing stuff come flying out of a suitcase, all that kind of stuff would be like, oh, got to get this on my camera. You know, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. Balladarian.
Balladarian.
Balladarian. Okay. While the Belvedere Inn offers spectacular views of the countryside, it sometimes gives visitors a terrifying glimpse of life after death. Located on Hospital Road, the inn served as Union Federal Hospital during Day 2 of the Battle of Gettysburg. Suzanne Lonke, the owner, has collected dozens of stories and photos of her guests' ghostly encounters. According to a psychic, the inn appears to be haunted by Confederate soldiers buried underneath a nearby tennis court. That's interesting. The oldest, say, I've never heard of that. The oldest part of the Belvedere dates back to the Bushman farm in 1812, and it served as a Union field hospital during the Battle of Gettysburg. It's allegedly haunted by dozens of spirits. One is a Confederate officer that pops up in folks' photographs. The spooks of 7 Rebs buried under at the current tennis court. Tough to get any rest there, much less eternal. Are also about. The marigold room sports a lady ghost that appears at the foot of the bed. Jeffrey, aka Loverboy, haunts the primrose room. He allegedly likes the ladies, especially blondes, and enjoys rubbing their feet while croning a love song. Then the cheeky spook hops into bed with them. Now that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, that would. Now, Mary actually has a question in chat. She says, do you believe that a parallel universe on the war field could be crossed into? I believe so. I believe any parallel universe.
Yeah.
But she's saying maybe trading places with a soldier. So does she mean crossed into and trading places and being on the other side? Is that what she means?
A parallel universe. But now, see, the thing about parallel universes is everything happens opposite. So, or at least that's the way I understand it. So, if you had a civil war in a parallel universe, instead of the Union winning, the Confederates probably would have won.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And now that would be interesting to be able to go into that parallel universe and see how things turned out. But
yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah, but I want to have a rope to pull me back through because I ain't staying. Anyway, ghost train.
All right. Tourists can also take a 90-minute ride on the ghost train, the only ghost tour in Gettysburg that takes visitors across the actual battlefield. One of the tour storytellers says that he and the passengers have smelled cigar smoke and seen the souls of soldiers roaming on the train or near the tracks while traveling across the battlefield.
Leitner Farmhouse Bed and Breakfast. The Union Army commandeered Leitner Farmhouse as a hospital. The wounded lay in the fields around the farmhouse, waiting until a doctor could treat them. A few of these deceased soldiers are said to still lurk about in the dead of night. Several of my friends have stayed in this federal-style building and have experienced ghostly phenomena. The day I visited this beautiful bed and breakfast, and we're not meaning me here, folks. The day I visited this beautiful bed and breakfast, I too experienced paranormal happenings in the parlor room, which was the operating room of the Civil War hospital. Okay, Her Tavern and Public House. If you would go ahead and do the next one, y'all got to excuse me.
All right. Her Tavern and Public House, the 1815 Federal-style building, remained behind Confederate lines and was used as the Confederate hospital, where it was said that amputated limbs were thrown out the window into a waiting wagon for burial. Now, that's pretty weird. According to the Her Tavern and Public House website, There are literally dozens of incidences at her tavern that would indicate that it is haunted. Steve Wolf, the owner, is the first to admit that his place is haunted. Steve calls one of the ghosts my buddy Freddie. Steve still thinks that the ghost of Frederick Herr, although has no way to be sure. Next, we have Gettysburg College. Founded as Pennsylvania College in 1832, it was a sister institution to the Lutheran Theological Seminary. During the Battle of Gettysburg, the school's Pennsylvania Hall was used by both sides as a field hospital and communications outpost as the tides of the battle ebbed and flowed. The school even had its own troops, the 26th Pennsylvania Emergency Militia Regiment. They actually got into the combat with light casualties, although over 100 other students were taken prisoners. No wonder their team nickname is the Bullets. It became Gettysburg College in 1921. Dwight David Eisenhower was heavily involved with the institution and even had an office there that still bears his name.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah.
While you were gone, the Her Tavern.
Yeah.
It said that the Confederate hospital is said to where the amputated limbs were thrown out a window into a waiting wagon for burial.
Now there was amputated legs and arms thrown out a window and piled up so high you could see them when you threw them out the window because it was that high, the pile.
That's crazy.
So yeah, you can imagine. And in a lot of cases, and people don't think about it, I guess, a lot, but in a lot of cases, the amputees did not survive the operation.
Yeah.
So, you have probably spirits hanging around those hospitals because, they died during amputations or something, and, they're still there like, well, why ain't you fixing me? Just saying, that's and imagine if you would, like, hundreds of soldiers, spirits out there trying to dig through that pile of arms and legs to get their stuff back.
Yeah, very well.
I know my arm's in here somewhere, you know what I mean?
Trying to connect their bodies together.
Yeah. The spirit side, maybe they could, who knows?
Yeah.
But that's just another thought for the...
Now, if they show themselves, are they missing those limbs? Very well, could be.
Could be. Brewer Hall. This is the home of the Performing Arts Department and Klein Theater, once the college chapel. It's haunted by the spook of an older Civil War officer called the General. He's been seen in the catwalks and backstage and enjoys playing pranks with the props and costumes. He also likes watching the performances and has his own center stage seat that depresses when he sits in it and pops back up when he leaves. The student actors make sure it's always empty just in case the General wants to catch the show. Now, how cool is that?
Yeah. That's very cool. This is also part of Gettysburg College. What's wrong? Glatfelter Hall. The legend goes that a young couple climbed the bell tower of Glatfelter in a suicide pact. The girl jumped, but the guy changed his mind. Her spook has since been seen on the bell tower, but only by males. It seems she's trying to lure a fellow to jump for her, to replace her cowardly beau and join her in the afterlife. The 1887 structure is the Computer Science Center now, so Gettysburg College techies, beware if you hear her sirens call. Go figure he changes his mind.
Right. Pennsylvania Hall, the old dorm, built in 1837. This is the oldest building on campus. The Rebs used it as a command post during the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's said that the spooks of 3 Confederate sentries can still be seen in the building's cupola. It was also used as a hospital. Most of them were. The old dorm's most famous story, as related by Mark Nesbitt in Ghosts of Gettysburg, involves 2 administrators on the elevator passing around the intended stop. And of course, we know what they saw. Were terrified watched doctors that were performing meatball surgery on their patients and watching the pile of amputated limbs stack up in the corner grow. The scene was completely silent, but when one of the blood-soaked doctors approached them, they hit every button on the elevator and escaped. The spook doc probably thought they were a couple of nurses coming to help him. See, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, looking at him and saying, like, you know, why ain't you coming to help here? You know, what's going on?
Yeah.
But they weren't about to stick around to find out, just in case he was looking for a ticket out of the OR. The woman found a guard and went back downstairs suspecting a student prank, but the basement was empty except for some boxes. When they arrived, it's never been experienced again.
You got to catch it. You know, there's got to be something in the air or something for you to catch those scenes in these places.
Well, the thing about it is timing and all this stuff, you know, on a lot of these. Only now, see, he would not be considered residual.
Yeah.
I mean, he was coming to them like, you know, come on, come on.
That's intelligent.
Yeah. But now the rest of the scene could have been residual. Now, I don't know if they mixed. I've never heard. Never heard anybody else mention having a residual scene where one spirit out of the bunch, you know, would interact.
Yeah.
Now, that's an interesting thought, and I'm going to have to dig into that some more because I never even thought about that. And could it happen? Yeah, I guess it could happen.
But I mean, just to catch these scenes like that, I mean, it's like you said, it's going to be like a once in a lifetime thing, you know?
But they said it happened one time and it hasn't happened.
And it hasn't happened again, exactly.
It couldn't happen again. Like I said, timing and all that, you know, if the date was right, the time was right, yeah, they might accidentally run into it again. Or depending on, as the saying goes, how thin the veil is at that present time, you know. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible it could happen again.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's just the trigger. It's like the trigger part of it. It's fascinating.
And you got to wonder if you went down there with the right stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, you know, implements that they used for surgery during that time. Set up some tables like they would have used. Put the implements on a table near them where they could use them. You know, you might be able to draw that out. It's like any other kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Trigger object.
Trigger objects. You know, but this is more of them opening the door and seeing it versus you know what I mean? It's just random like that. It's crazy.
You know, if you placed all the right things at the right place and you dressed in the right garb, you was laying on the table.
Yeah.
You know, only thing is, what if they really could pick up those saws and start sawing your arm off? Now that would be a little bad. You have to make sure yeah, you might want to be a little aware for that one. Be ready to jump up in a hurry.
They really had these piles of limbs, huh? It's like you think that they would donate them or something, you know?
Donate them?
Like donors.
What are you going to do with a shot tore up
That's true.
limb or arm, you know.
That's true. All right, let's see. We
Not
got
to
White
mention,
House.
not to mention at that time, I don't think they donated body parts and organs and stuff.
They were more stealing them out of graves.
So anyway, the Red House.
All right, this off-campus apartment house is generally occupied by women attending Gettysburg College. It's said that the grave of the Civil War era girl is in the backyard and she haunts the house. You can tell she's around when you smell her lilac perfume in the home or when she pulls one of her poltergeist tricks like moving things around or breaking dishes.
Okay. Remind me to check out the Red House too. There we go. Stevens Hall. There's one very well known ghost haunting this hall, opened in 1868. It's the Blue Boy. The story goes that an orphan fled from the homestead and was given shelter by a couple of girls at the Pennsylvania College in their dorm room. The house mother knocked on the door and the girls hid the boy outside on a window ledge because he would surely be returned to the orphanage if found. The weather was frigid and the house mother stayed and chatted for an hour. She finally left, but when the girls went to get the child, he was gone. He had wandered off and left nothing behind but footprints in the snow. We don't know exactly what happened to the poor lad, but ever since, girls staying in that room have been visited by his spook. It has frozen blue lips. He's also been seen peering into Stephen's windows. As for his window, it's known to fly open whenever there is a winter storm, even when it's locked. Once a girl saw him, shook her head at the sight, and when she looked again, he was gone. But the words "help me" were written in reverse on the icy pane. This is another tale made famous by Mark Nesmith, Ghost of Gettysburg. There's a lady ghost that's been spotted roaming the halls of Stevens, but we don't have her story. There are also tales of whispers coming from the attic and the spirit of a young girl that looks at herself in the dorm mirrors. You can see her reflection, but not her.
Huh. Now, Roger, have you been to Waverly?
Do what now?
Have you been to Waverly?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, Creepy McNightmares in chat wants to know if you ever did a paranormal investigation at Waverly, and I'm pretty sure you did, didn't you?
Yes, I did. 8 hours.
That's awesome.
Not a lot of activity. I mean, there were personal experiences, but it's hard to document. We did get some EVPs and one possible photograph, but I mean, it was too much paranoia to really tell if it was anything or not.
Okay.
But now I did hear footsteps walking up from the bottom of the death tunnel. It's pitch black. You couldn't see anything, and my recorder did not record it, and I was so mad. But I mean, they were plain. You could hear them really plain. Anyway.
All
Okay,
right.
that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, I thought you. And there's the echo again. Echo. All right. Theodore Chi House. The urban legend here is that a previous owner of the house hung himself in the basement. If you're unfortunate enough to see his ghost hanging, you or someone close to you will run into bad luck. The fraternity must have run out of luck. The Theta Chi are no longer on campus. Maybe everyone was in the basement at a kegger and the ghost appeared.
Tilly Pierce House. Now, this was a familiar one, a familiar sounding, probably to a lot of people. It's now a bed and breakfast inn. Tilly was a 15-year-old girl who volunteered as a field nurse and later wrote a memoir of her experiences. Guests hear footsteps and report feelings of being watched. At times, the air inexplicably becomes cold and cameras and other electronic devices malfunction. And this next one's a very familiar one, too.
The Jenny Wade house.
Yeah.
It's actually very popular. There's a whole lot of lore connected to this Baltimore Street home. Jenny, her name was given, her given name was Mary Virginia Wade, was staying with her sister in half of the duplex while the battle raged around them. Jenny was baking bread for the Union soldiers on July 3rd when a rebel bullet, allegedly shot from the Farnsworth house, which we talked about earlier, went through 2 doors and caught her in the shoulder, quickly killing her. Jenny's body was laid out in the cellar, and she was the dubious distinction of being the only civilian killed during the battle, although others died from injuries afterwards. There are supposedly a covey of ghosts hanging around the house. Now it's a museum. Jenny's still there, and you can sometimes smell the aroma of baking bread and her rose-scented perfume in the home. Some people say that they're still awaiting word on her beau, Saint Jack Skelly.
And Sergeant Jack.
Her friend was supposed to check on him. He was killed at Culp's Hill before he could see her. Her dad's spook is supposed to be in the house too. He was said to have lost his mind and ended his days in the poorhouse because he wasn't at the house protecting his daughter when she died. He held himself responsible for her death. Other stories say that he's bitter because he wasn't allowed to attend Jenny's funeral, or that in his mental state he didn't remember Jenny was dead and would wander into the cellar looking for her. Needless to say, he's not considered a very, very friendly spirit to run into because a bit of poltergeist activity in the basement, mainly in the form of cigar smoke and twirling guide post chains. But there are some very friendly spirits scattered around the Wade house to offset Dad's presence. An orphanage, a few doors down the street, was said to be run by a sadistic director, and Jenny and her sister would let the children play in the house. The orphans' ghosts are very touchy-feely, bunch of rugrats. They've been known to say hi to tour guests and follow them along the museum. They like to hold hands and tug at your ankles, coats and jewelry, still craving attention. They play with the beds upstairs. They may be the greatest compliment to Jenny and her sister. The everlasting affection of the neighborhood waits. But she does not. But she does have one more honor. Her grave, marked by the Mary Virginia Wade Monument in Evergreen Cemetery, flies a flag 24 hours a day by presidential decree. She's the only American woman besides Betsy Ross to ever be given that honor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, wow. All right, what's going on? Okay. Dubbin House Tavern, Gettysburg Inn. Reverend Alexander Dubbin built a house for himself and his family in 1776. And now it's the oldest crib in Gettysburg. The Dubbin House Tavern in the mid-1800s, a secret crawl space featured in National Geographic magazine, served as a station for hiding runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad. After the Battle of Gettysburg, it served as a hospital for wounded soldiers of both the North and the South. You can, according to lore, catch sight of the Rev to this day with his cigar and meet different departed members of the Klan on the steps. There are phenomena from its hospital days, too. It's said you can hear groans and occasionally blood will seep through the floorboards. There's even a ghostly posse of nurses that cross the neighboring field apparently on their way to assist the doctors. If you visit the Springhouse Tavern, you might get to see some Civil War troopers bellied up to the bar and enjoying a cold one. Some even head up the steps on their way to bed. Well, I wouldn't mind bellying up to the bar with a few Confederates. Just saying.
Soldiers National Museum, Soldiers Orphanage Cellar. Orphanage was found in honor of a Union soldier whose body was found clutching a photo of his children, and initially run by his widow. When she remarried and left Gettysburg, it was taken over by Rosa Carmichael, who was a cruel and abusive to the 130 children in her charge. She and some of the children linger in the cellar.
Sorry about that, you guys. Her tavern. You sure they his tavern?
We already did that. Skip
it. Hers Tavern. Started in 1815 as the Sweeney Tavern. One of its early guests may have been Davy Robber Lewis, the Robin Hood of the East. There really was a Robin Hood?
Yeah, there was.
Anyway, in 1828, it became Hers Tavern. Frederick Herr was quite a character. He supposedly ran a cat house upstairs, a counterfeiting press in the basement, and still used the tavern as a stop of the Underground Railroad. He was allowed to see the Confederates use his place for a field hospital. It was behind red lines for the duration of the battle. The building changed hands and business during the years, becoming a dairy farm by the early 1900s. It was resurrected as Hers Tavern once again in 1977. It's a good thing, too. Its spooks were getting bored haunting the Guernsey cattle. The normal staff poltergeist phenomena, folks stuck in the floor, and the sound of pots and pans, dishes and glasses shattering, among other things. The electronics sometimes go haywire. Once the owner and his bud were closing up for the night when they heard the door open and footsteps go down the bar, even though the door was locked. They were even more surprised when they heard a disembodied voice ask for a beer twice. One of the waitresses saw a man at the bar. When she went to take his order, he disappeared. They attribute these sightings to thirsty Civil War spooks. Footsteps have been heard going down the hall and turning the doorknobs. People who have reported seeing a mother and a baby looking out a window on the stairs. They've heard a crying baby, a soft lullaby. Some think it's Suzanne Herr, Frederick's wife, while others think that it's a woman that came to check on her husband when it was a field hospital. I'm sorry, but, I just got to say, if I worked in a bar like that, a tavern, and a spirit asked me for a beer twice, I'd have to set one up for him. Just out of respect. Here you go, bud. And I'd even have one with him, just because I'm all like that, buddy type, And how's that old saying go? Nobody likes to drink alone.
Yep.
Except for the dude in the song, I Drink Alone.
I like to drink alone.
Nobody else. Yeah, him. Yeah. Anyway, in Burson's Pits, or the Forney Farm.
Iverson's
Forney Farm.
Forney Farm. General Alfred Iverson ordered his North Carolina troops to advance in the Battle of Oak Hill. Without a benefit of scouts or reserves, he was to pay dearly when they were cut down in an ambush formed by the Yankees. He lost over 500 men in 15 minutes. The bodies pushed into shallow trenches, Iverson pits, and left undisturbed until 1870 when they were reclaimed. But early on, the field workers of Forney's farm would go nowhere near the pits. The Dutch farmers reported a mist that arose over the field every afternoon that attributed to the fallen troops, and the ghosts of the men that had been buried there frightened them too much to work. To this day, investigators come away with orb pictures where some of orbs. You know how you feel about orbs, Roger.
I knew you were waiting for me to say something.
Some of the bodies left behind, or the spooks just unable to free themselves from their sudden violent end. Either way, this is supposed to be one of the most active paranormal spots of Gettysburg.
It's really active with all those dust and moisture. It may be a spirit or two.
Hey, you don't know you can see. You never seen one of those orbs that have pictures in them, faces and buildings and stuff.
Paranoia.
Oh, come on.
The human eye is meant to see faces and stuff like that. So you're going to see them whether they're there or not.
That's a tongue twisted word for me. What is it? Pareidoia?
Yes.
Pareidoia. Got it.
Yeah. That, in other words, you're just seeing things that you want to see. It's not real.
Yeah.
Pickett's charge. First, let's give George Pickett his props. I'm sorry. He already had his troops. The disastrous charge that bears his name was actually led by James Longstreet, who got into a heated argument with Lee about the futility of a frontal assault the night before, and thought up by Robert E. Lee, who should have listened to Longstreet, who wanted to outmaneuver and flank the Yanks, so the blame has to be shared. And as Pickett later said, the Yankees might have had something to do with it too. Nevertheless, the action lost 55% of the 12,500 Confederates that courageously swarmed up the hill. And the battle is being replayed today. If you're between the rebel jump-off points in Seminary Ridge and Spangler's Woods and the Yankee strongholds at Cemetery Ridge, the Little Big Top and Cemetery Hill, it's said that you can sometimes hear musketry, artillery, and drumming sounds coming from the ridges. It's been reported that on some days you can actually see the gray ranks moving across the field as phantom rebel brigades continue to press their attack. In fact, some folk have claimed that the spook soldiers charged right through them on their way to the blue lines.
Huh.
Interesting.
Imagine having soldiers just go right through you. That's pretty cool.
Right.
I like to see that. The Humblebog House. Is that what it is? Humblebog? Confederate General William Barksdale breathed his last in this house after being wounded on Seminary Ridge. The last time he was seen alive, he was lying in the house being spoon-fed by water by a young boy. Barksdale kept calling for more water again and again. It is said that on some evening you can still hear his voice calling out. But the star spook of this place isn't the general, but his pooch. Miss Barksdale made the trip from Mississippi to claim her husband's body and brought along his favorite hunting hound. The body was disinterred and re-died for the trip back home. But the dog wouldn't leave his master's grave no matter how much Miss Barksdale tried. She finally left, both touched and saddened by the hound's loyalty. It wouldn't leave Barksdale's grave, lying beside it and occasionally letting loose with a great howl. The locals tried to feed and water the dog, but it refused all efforts to care for it and eventually died. Still, besides its master, it's said that every July 2nd on the anniversary of Barksdale's death, at the night is rent by mournful howling. Why did the dog stay? Some think perhaps Barksdale's spirit stayed at the humble bark house. Some think that the dog knew this was the final place his master drew his last breath.
That's interesting because that's not the first case of a dog doing that I've heard of.
Huh.
Actually, I saw a video of a guy that had a, well, actually, it was a woman. One of them was a woman, one was a man that I saw that had a marble slab over the top of his grave, and the dog would lay on that slab all night long.
Huh.
And then it would go home, I guess, and eat and stuff, but it would always come back before dark and lay on that slab all night long. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Peach orchard or triangular field. A lot of people heard of it as triangular field. I've never heard of it as peach orchard, but the peaceful apple and peach orchards of Joe Shelley was a serene as sight as you could possibly imagine, but during the Battle of Gettysburg, it became a scene of chaos and bloodshed as Confederate troops overran the Union artillery positions there. It's said that you can see and hear the ghosts of soldiers fighting among the trees to this day. Now, I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all over Pennsylvania.
Slaughter Pen and Valley of Death.
Yep, the only thing we have on the Valley of Death is the Devil's Den soldier occasionally shows up here at the foot of Little Round Top. Phantom regiments and the battles are often seen and heard.
Now, see, that was, I think, the picture that I had was the soldier at the base of the Devil's Den right there. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a Confederate soldier.
The one along the fence?
The one standing there at the Devil's Den.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Outland Farm, now Battlefield Bed and Breakfast, was the campsite of retreating Confederates after the battle and possibly the site of the final shots of the battle. In guests have reported seeing a Confederate soldier in the house and on its grounds, a young girl in the house who occasionally hugs guests, and a young woman in a light blue dress seated at a writing desk. Sounds of footsteps are often heard, doors unlock themselves, and an ethereal lantern has been seen in an adjoining field.
Doubleday Inn. This bed and breakfast is a fairly new entry, having been built in 1939 as a private home and converted into a bed and breakfast in 1987. But its property has a pedigree. It's built on a parcel of land that was once the Forney Farm, the site of the battlefield of Oak Hill, and Ivor said that if you can hear marching and voices yelling back and forth outside some nights, inside the house, spook is a humming woman with her hair in a bun. You can sometimes spot her at the foot of your bed before she disappears. Imagine waking up to that.
Right. Duffy's Tavern. Man, they got a lot of taverns in this place. Duffy's was built in 1819 by Colonel James Johnston and his wife, Hannah. It used to serve the local gentry and even had a ballroom on the second floor. The tavern's alleged spook, though, only shuffled off this mortal coil in 1961. He was Harry Duffy, a former owner that died while at Duffy's. He rearranges chairs, turns on the water, slams doors, and knocks glasses off the bar. Orbs have been seen floating around the dining room, so Harry seems to have some company. One night, when the lights shut off, the waitress called out, "That's enough, Harry," and the power came right back on. The staff believes that Harry is a friendly ghost and just looking for a little love from the Duffy's crowd while he walks around with his dust bunnies and moisture.
Now that's seen with your eye, seeing orbs flying around with your naked eye. Is that what they mean?
Do what? Hey, he's playing with his dust bunnies and his moisture balls. Leave him alone.
Oh, you're crazy, Roger. All right, we got Adams County Courthouse. The courthouse was built in 1959 and is located at the corner of Baltimore and West Middle Street. According to the police that worked there that night, when the building is closed, a gray human-sized blob has been spotted several times floating around the rooms.
Now, I'll buy a gray human-sized blob.
But you won't take orbs.
Right.
Gray human-sized blob.
The angle was where the stone wall that sheltered the Yankee line on Cemetery Ridge made a turn. It marked the high point of the Confederacy when Brigadier General Lewis Armstead, waving his feathered hat on the tip of his sword, led 200 men over the wall and engaged in bloody hand-to-hand combat before being repulsed by Union reinforcements. He was part of the ill-fated Pickett's charge. It's said that you can still hear the cannons roar. The Rebs initiated a 2-hour bombardment before the attack, and the Yankees responded with an hour's cannonade during the battle. The din was so loud that it was heard in Washington, D.C., 80 miles away. Other sounds include those of combat and galloping horses. One ranger reported seeing a mounted officer he couldn't distinguish what side he was from on horseback, who disappeared after getting within 10 feet of him. Some have allegedly seen Robert E. Lee on horseback across the field towards Seminary Ridge. He also reports many cold spots experienced at the angle. One set of Civil War buffs had an interesting visit to the angle. Dressed as Virginians, they were approached by 3 Confederate soldiers. They thought they were another group of reenactors and greeted them. The soldiers didn't say a word, but with a serious look on their faces near them, looked them up and down and walked away only to disappear in a fog. Now that would be wild. That would be very interesting indeed. Children of the Battlefield.
All right, this tale starts out as one of the nicest bits of lore to come out of Gettysburg and ends as depravity. It starts with the discovery of a Union soldier's body in Kuhn's brickyard. The unknown soldier was found with his children's picture in his hand, the last sight he saw before dying. He became a cause celebrate amongst newspapers of the day, and they ran a contest of sorts to find out who the trooper was. It ended up being Sergeant Amos Humanston of Portville, New York. A memorial was erected for him in Gettysburg, the only enlisted man to be so honored. An orphanage fund was begun in his memory, and the home was built in Gettysburg. It was originally run by his widow, Philinda, who brought their 3 children with her to Gettysburg, Frank, Fred, and Alice. Called the Homestead, it was by all reports a happy and well-run operation, but Philinda hated Gettysburg. She quickly remarried, many say to escape the town, and left with her children. That's when the bad times started. New mistress Rosa Carmichaels would shackle the children in the basement dungeon or outside, just one among many despicable acts she committed. Financial wizard Dr. John Francis Burns, who had raised the money to build the homestead, absconded with the remainder of the homestead endowment. After only a dozen years, it was shut down. The homestead is a private residence now, but one haunted by the past. Ghosts of the mistreated children have been reported in the basement and yard. Other visitors had their clothes and bodies tugged by invisible spirits. There were supposedly photos not only of orbs, but of shadowy outlines of the orphans. And worst of all is the scene of incredible sadness that lays over the place.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a lot of sadness that lays over a place covered with a bunch of dust balls. Anyway, Eisenhower home. Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower used the home as a weekend retreat while in D.C. It's where Ike recovered from his 1955 heart attack, where they retired to and where they both eventually died. Apparently, Mamie enjoyed the quiet times and serenity there. It's said the First Lady's ghost can sometimes be seen at her former home in the living room and her old bedroom. Part of the local lore says that a psychic contacted Mamie and she was upset that the Park Service was going to tear down part of the property to put up a parking lot. After hearing what the seer told them, they canceled those plans. Now that's something you don't see every day. The spook of a maid has also been reported, and some have claimed to see a glimpse of both Mamie's mom and DDE in the home.
Well, here we go. We have George House. Would you want to name your kid George?
George.
George. Now, originally part of Dobbin's homestead during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Like George Foreman named all his kids George.
Oh, yeah, he did, didn't he?
Yeah.
How many kids does he have?
A bunch of them.
And they're all George?
They're all George. I wonder if he named his daughters George. Do you have any daughters?
Georgette. No? Doesn't work for you?
No. See, he likes his name so much he named all his kids George.
They can't be all boys.
So he wouldn't have named them Georgette.
He couldn't have all boys, though, Roger.
I said, did he have any daughters? If he did he name them George too? Just asking, a question here. Anyway, on with the story.
All right. Originally part of the Dobson's homestead during the Battle of Gettysburg, the small stone building was the home of George. Oddly enough, George was just the tenant. John Myers owned the house, but somehow history has managed to forget him. Anyway, Union General John Reynolds was brought here on the first day of combat, fatally wounded, and his body kept in the house until it could be shipped home to Lancaster for burial. In fact, his blood is supposed to still stain the floor. One eerie phenomenon has been associated with this place. You have to jump ahead a century or more when a mother and daughter were strolling down Steinwar Street in Gettysburg Historical District one night. They saw a woman dressed in a Civil War era clothes sitting beside the coffin of a Union officer through a shop window. Thinking it was a display of a wax museum, the pair stopped by again during the date of visit. To their shock, the shop was instead a photography studio without a trace of a funeral setting. Apparently, they managed to witness a flashback in time to see General Reynolds' body laying in the state of with the mourner.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Gettysburg Best Western. Beginning as Scott's Tavern in 1797, becoming the Indian Tavern in 1809, the McClellan House in 1846, and finally the Gettysburg Hotel in 1890, the building has seen quite a bit of history. It closed in 1964, but was restored and opened as the Gettysburg Best Western Hotel in 1991. It's home to Rachel, the friendly spook of a Civil War nurse that visitors bump into in the hotel halls and sometimes on Gettysburg streets. She's also known to rummage through people's drawers in the rooms. Some speculate that she's looking for a material to make bandages from, as she still tends to her wounded soldiers in the old McClellan house. Travel Channel adds that there's a woman ghost that's been spotted dancing in the ballroom, and the spook of a Union soldier, James Culverston of the Pennsylvania Reserves, still haunts the halls where he died.
Okay.
Well, that's
Yep.
kind of, I wouldn't want to go in there and put some nice, clean, folded shirts in a drawer and have her rip them into bandages. I'm just saying. But then again, if she shows herself to me and I get to see her rip them into bandages, she can have all the shirts she wants. You know what I mean?
I agree with that. I do. That's great. The Lower House. John Lower built a 25-room Queen Anne-style home on a Carlisle Street in 1895. Today, the first floor is a private residence, and the second is let out to girls from Gettysburg College. The co-eds heard strange noises, footsteps, and voices, and suffered through some odd occurrences, like having their personal stuff rearranged, doors locked and unlocked, and electronics with a mind of their own. One night, a girl heard footsteps going down the hall. There was no one there, and even more eerie, the steps stopped at an open door, which then shut behind them. Now, I'd like to see that.
Right.
They once heard a crash as if someone fell down the stairs, but then when they investigated, the steps were empty. A little girl passing the house told her mom she could see a young woman through the window dressed in turn of the century clothes with her hair in a light bun. She was beating a rug. Later, a workman was digging around in the basement and found a tombstone. There you go. It read Joanna Craig, the same name that came up during the Ouija board session, trying to contact the resident spirit. Adding 2 to 2 together, it seems the Carlisle Street spook is the shade of a servant girl, Joanna, who died in a fall down the steps and never left her place of employment. Still looking out for her bosses. She may not be alone. Psychic Carol Kirkpatrick saw the ghost of a cavalryman, complete with saber in his house. John Lower was a Civil War veteran who had fought at Gettysburg with the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry. Now that's a place I like to see.
Right. Exactly. James McCleary. James McCleary was a Union trooper fighting at East Cemetery Ridge on July 3rd. He met his maker when a Reb cannonball killed him, mangling his legs and sending his hand flying through the air. As fate would have it, the hand landed on one of the artillery lunettes, the earthen wall built in front of the artillery to protect the crew from musketry. It's said that on some foggy summer nights, McCleary's solitary figure can be seen floating among the preserved lunettes, looking for his hand. He's buried just a few hundred yards away from the scene of his death at Evergreen Cemetery. He's looking for his hand.
What did his hand hit?
So it landed on top of one of the walls they built to protect the soldiers from musket fire while they were doing their artillery.
Huh. That's interesting.
It is. How odd is that it would just land but on top of one of those walls, you know?
That's true.
Yeah, that's a little creepy.
I think that's pretty cool.
I like it like that.
Museum of Spiritual Investigations. Pretty handy. no pun intended, for the paranormal history group to work out of a haunted house, but that's just what this nonprofit does. The museum exhibits the tools and history of the paranormal trade in a building that dates itself into a log cabin and was used as a field hospital during the Civil War battle and the Spanish-American War. It's regularly investigated, both as a matter of professional curiosity and training. It's perfect for ghost hunters practicing their craft, with sightings of a female apparition in the first floor bathroom, quick flashes of shadow figures, and reports of phantom voices and footsteps.
Now that'd be cool. That'd be interesting just to check out. Old Gus. Old Gus has been haunting the old Adams County jail site for the past century. No one's sure who Gus is. He may be an old inmate or former guard, or maybe a soldier that occupied the building during the Civil War battle. He had his heyday back in the 1950s when the structure was a library building. It's now the police station, government offices on 59 E High Street. Gus used to appear to the visitors, but was more known for his poltergeist tricks, sweeping books off shelves and playing with the lights and moving things around. He also associated with the aroma of cooking, but he was a friendly sort of ghost. If his antics were bothering you too much, a simple Gus, not now, would quiet him down. The police and the government guys haven't said if Gus is still around, but it's claimed that when the offices are empty at night, someone is still playing with the lights upstairs. Shoot, I'd be like, Gus, come on.
I know. Play with me.
Show me something. You have my permission to act up. The old schoolhouse.
In Civil War days, there was a schoolhouse on High Street. Its home is now a business. Miss Hall taught there, and her and her two boys lived upstairs. After school, she let the kids out to play with the warning, be careful and be home before it's dark. One day, just one son returned. He told her that his brother had grabbed an unexploded shell. It blew up and killed him. As it was shortly after the battle, the body was quickly buried in an unmarked grave along with the soldiers. Well, Miss Hall couldn't believe it. Every evening until she died, she lit a candle in the attic window to guide her son back home. After she died, no matter what use the building was put to, a candle burned in that window every night through the year without fail. Until recently, that is. The rain and weather exposed an old grave, and the bones of a young boy were discovered. Legend has it that the remains were of Mrs. Hall's son, finally found after all those years, and now that he's home, there's no more need for the candle.
Oh, wow.
At least they found him.
Well, they brought him home. Where'd they bury him at? Because they had to rebury him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a thought. Pennsylvania Monument. The Pennsylvania Monument, the largest in the Gettysburg National Military Park, is located at Cemetery Ridge. It's said that you can hear the military bands playing as they did before the battle, with visitors reporting drum and fife music wafting in the air from the nearby woods.
Okay, we have the pub. This bar restaurant is said to be haunted by the spirit of a woman that was murdered and left in the building during one of its renovation phases. She likes to play with doors and the lights, and is seen in the ladies' room in the kitchen.
Ridgewood. Residents of this small housing development have reported seeing a spook in a tuxedo, blue lights in the surrounding woods, and a ghost they can hear running down the railroad tracks throwing rocks. First off, I want to see a ghost in a tuxedo. I want a picture of that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, fancy dress and all. Well, now I do have the picture of the lady in red where it looks like she's wearing a red ball gown. So, if he wants to wear a tuxedo, far be it from me, to interfere with that.
It's too bad you can't get those pictures up.
I know.
You even tested that.
Of course,
All
I don't think I had one of a guy in a tuxedo.
right. Yeah, that's true. The Rose Farm. Rose Farm was an integral part of the Battle of Wheatfield, and the farmhouse served as a field hospital and its yard as a makeshift cemetery. One of the Rose daughters was said to have gone insane from the experiences of the fight and its aftermath. The story is that she saw blood flowing from the walls of the house, as reported by Mark Nesbitt in his Gettysburg book series. Also, a glowing shape was reported by the graves of the soldiers shortly after the battle.
Huh. Seminary Hill spook. After the Battle of Seminary Hill, the Confederates stored the bodies of their dead in a nearby barn. According to legend, one of the troopers wasn't dead, but buried alive under the corpses. Ew. His screams went unheard during the battle, and eventually Union soldiers found him and pulled him out of the mass of rotting flesh. But it was too late. He died shortly thereafter and was one of the few rebels to be given a full military burial. Several days later, the barn burned down and was remade into a farmhouse, but the sounds of an explosion and banging noises in a downstairs room, the spot where the soldier had lain, were reported by owners, many of whom were frightened enough to leave the house for good. One set of residents eventually called in a priest to perform an exorcism, and that seems to have done the trick. His spirit is now finally at rest. I like the name of this one. The Shiver House.
The Shiver House. All right. Well, the home of George and Hetty Shiver was taken.
River, my bad.
River. Yeah, was taken over by rebel snipers during the battle. While not considered haunted, it's a source of a true urban legend. The story says that sharpshooter operating out of the house was killed by a Yankee marksman, and his blood still covers the walls of his upstairs sniper's nest. Guess what? Police forensics ran a test, and the story is true. The blood dates back to the Civil War, so here's one tale you don't need a ghost cam to prove.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Spangler Spring. The first story dates a couple of decades past the Gettysburg conflict to the 1800s. A woman met her lover boy at the spring, their favorite spot, and he told her that the relationship was over. Distraught, she killed herself, then and there, dying in his arms. Talk about your messy breakups. Another version claims she killed herself after she realized her married Romeo wasn't going to leave his wife. It's said that she still roams the spring area with a broken heart. Two nurses that went ghost hunting found her. They heard a popping sound followed by a rising mist from behind a tree that formed into the lady in white. One woman felt deep sadness and the other felt sharp fear. They skedaddled. It's said that the ghost is always walking head down, stopping often and bending over as if she's looking for something, maybe a ring. True Ghost Story says that there have been sightings of rebel soldiers in the area too. Spangler Spring was the site of brutal combat, and according to legend, the thirsty troops on both sides would allow one another a temporary ceasefire so they could take turns at having a water break.
Twin Sycamores. Actually, this Baltimore Street house should be called the Lone Sycamore. There's only one left of the pair that once framed the house. The main spook here is a playful young child, best known for arranging his toy soldiers into battle lines, a part of the Ghost of Gettysburg tour. It was reported that one night the tour spotted 3 different spirits in the Twin Sycamores.
George Weichert House. Located between the Big and Little Round Tops, George and Ann Weichert's house was used as a field hospital during the battle. It was the site of death agony and stacks of amputated limbs, but for all that, it's one of the more gently haunted homes of Gettysburg. It has two main phenomena. One is the heavy step of someone pacing in the attic. Of course, when the residents check, no one is there. It's presumed to be the sound of a concerned officer or doctor still in the house, although some think it's the spirits of nervous rebel soldiers. The other is the famous upstairs door that won't close. It's so frustrated that tenants that it's so frustrated the tenants that a park ranger nailed it shut one night. It was open again in the morning. The wheat field.
Well, one of the most fierce scenes of combat at Gettysburg, the ghosts of its dead are still supposed to haunt this field. According to reports, you can see the soldiers still endlessly waging combat. Another tale of terror attributed to the bloody wheat field is the losing of the hogs. That evening, as the wounded Union soldiers lay on the field, far from their comrades and help, hogs began to roam the field, probably freed from their pens during the battle. Hogs were known as scavengers, feeding on the dead. Many of the cries heard from this field today were supposed to be of grievously wounded soldiers trying to fend off the hungry swine. That's crazy.
Wow.
They really did that, huh?
I suppose. Could you imagine laying there wounded and couldn't move and hogs coming up start eating on you?
Yeah. It's like a medieval torture.
Right.
The rat.
Widow Thompson's house. The Widow Thompson's house was a part-time Gettysburg headquarters for Robert E. Lee and is now the General Lee HQ Museum. Psychic Carol Kilpatrick claims that the brass are still sitting around the kitchen table, kibitzing over the last day's attacks. Lee is arguing with James Longstreet. Robert E. wants a full frontal assault on the Yankee lines. Longstreet wants to maneuver around them and hit them on the flanks. Longstreet is so adamant about his position that he almost crosses the line into insubordination. Two other generals, unconfirmed by history but thought to be A.P. Hill and John Bell Hood, let the lines roar. The result was Pickett's charge and the eventual demise of the Confederate cause. It's no wonder Longstreet keeps trying to get in the last word.
The Willoughby Run. During the combat, the Confederates used 7-foot banks of Willoughby Run, both as an entrenchment and a place to get some relief from the blazing sun and the heat of the battle. It's said that on the last day of the battle and the troops were pulling out of that sudden thunderstorm, hit the area and caused a flash flood of Willoughby Creek. There actually was a storm just like that, trapped several troopers and drowned them. And you're supposed to be able to hear their cries to this day. The stream crosses town, and it's been reported that if you get too near a storm grate, that ghostly hands will grab you at your trousers cuffs in an effort to pull themselves out of the surging waters.
Wow.
Huh. That is interesting.
Oh, yeah. Andrew Wood's house. The house at 271 Baltimore Street was built in the early to late 1830s and was the home and workshop of carriage builder, repairman Andrew Woods. In 1997, Mark Nesbitt's Ghosts of Gettysburg tour gang bought it to use as its headquarters. So it must have some spooks, right? Yep, it does. Though oddly, no overt Civil War manifestations other than a voice or two in the attic and some residual energy in the cellar, it's thought that it served and did most of the town's buildings as a field hospital and sniper's nest. There are the customary orbs, shapeless blobs, and doors that open or slam for no good reason. Woods is still around and helped workmen renovating the building by opening doors for them when their hands were full. Must be part of the union contract. Psychic Carol Kilpatrick found some other spirits in the house too. Research seems to point to James Dobbins as one of the spooks, the son of a preacher. He still talks a good religious game and likes to slam doors. The other pair are probably Mary Kidsmiller and her son William, who died at an early age in the house. It's said that Mary calls out for her surviving son, Charles, and that young William can be heard shooting marbles upstairs. There's a woman spook in dark clothing who seems loco, but was actually as crazy as a fox. She had a mission as a secret courier and acted loony so that no one paid her any mind. The race of two little girls, Emily and her friend, play tag in the attic, and you can hear their voices.
Now, that's all the places that I actually did find in Gettysburg, which is pretty much a lot of places. But what we're going to talk about next is Gettysburg myths and misconceptions. The Battle of Gettysburg was fought over shoes. There was no mention of shoes having anything to do with the Battle of Gettysburg until 14 years after it happened. In 1877, Confederate General Henry Heth wrote, hearing that a supply of shoes was to be obtained in Gettysburg, 8 miles distant from Cashtown, and greatly needing shoes for my men, I directed General Pettigrew to go to Gettysburg and get these supplies. Problem is, there was no shoe factories anywhere near Gettysburg in 1863. Rather, roads took the armies to Gettysburg. It was difficult to travel through south-central Pennsylvania without passing through Gettysburg.
Myth number 2.
Uh-huh.
The first day was not a large battle. Despite how it is often portrayed in movies and documentaries, the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg involved nearly 50,000 soldiers and was one of the bloodiest days of the Civil War, with 16,000 men killed, wounded, missing, or captured. If the Battle of Gettysburg ended after the first day, it would still rank in the top 20 bloodiest battles of the Civil War, with more casualties than Cold Harbor and almost as many as Fredericksburg.
Okay, myth number 3. John Wellesley Culp was killed on his uncle's property. John Wellesley's cult moved south before the Battle of Gettysburg and joined the Virginia ranks. Although his unit fought on Culp's Hill, and he was the only man in the 2nd Virginia Regiment killed at Gettysburg, he did not die on his uncle's property, for which Culp's Hill is named. He most likely died on Abraham Sprangler's property or one of the farms far to the east of Culp's Hill.
Myth number 4. The fight for Little Round Top was the most important combat of the battle. Historians have long written about the disaster that would befall the Union Army if Little Round Top fell into Confederate hands. But even before the fighting began, General Meade had already ordered more than 10,000 reinforcements to the Union left. Had the Confederates captured Little Round Top, they would have been greatly outnumbered and low on ammunition, with a command structure in complete disarray. With nearly equal numbers, the Confederates almost captured Little Round Top twice during the battle. Why is it difficult to believe that organized and fully supplied Union troops could not retake it with at least triple the number of troops?
Myth number 5. Pickett's charge was the largest, most decisive, and most consequential charge of the war. Although often portrayed as the greatest charge of the Civil War, it was far from the largest, most decisive, or most consequential. Those honors would belong to other battlefields at Gaines Mill, Chickamauga, and Petersburg.
Myth number 6. Abraham Lincoln finished the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope on the way to Gettysburg. The original copy of the Gettysburg Address on its original stationery is in the possession of the Library of Congress, so we know on what material he wrote it. It is also well documented that Lincoln wrote portions of the address before he left Washington and put the finishing touches on the Gettysburg Address in the home of David Wills at Gettysburg.
That's interesting. Myth number 7. Gettysburg ghost stories are true. Well, with the exception of one story about Iverson's pits near Oaks Hill, there are no substantially disseminated ghost stories at Gettysburg for more than a century. The Ghosts at Gettysburg phenomenon started in the 1990s, which happened to coincide with people starting to make money on ghost books and tours. Today, there are scores of books and tours available for visitors, but most of all these stories are not historically in nature. The Civil War Trust historian once heard a ghost story told in 1993. It was presented as fiction, but it only took 3 months until it was in a book as fact. By all means, believe what you want, believe, but please know that if water gets on the camera lens, it's water, not a ghostly orb. If sun shines into a camera lens, it's called sunlight, not energy spear. That's a good way to end the show.
Exactly. But now, you can't tell me that there's no ghosts in Gettysburg. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh.
You know, I mean, with the amount of death and everything there, and as horrible as that was, you can't tell me there's no remnants, no, you know. I mean, I stink. I stink. I made earlier, y'all. But I think that, you know, they're still fighting the battle.
Yes.
I mean, I think they are. Not the only case. Actually, at Parker's Crossroads, which is not far from where I live, I did a little tour around the little walkway there and came up to where they had the little Union burial ground. And as I was coming up and I was talking and I was videoing this, I actually captured musket fire. And there were no reenactors. Nobody was there. Wasn't but 2 other people besides me and Dusty was there that day, and they were like back on the far side. But I captured 2 distinct musket shots, followed by some real low, like distant musket shots, like return fire or something. So yeah, you know, they're still fighting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I believe that.
Anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We didn't quite make our 2-hour mark, but a lot of good information and, of course, some fun times. Let's see what we got over here going on in the chat room. Unseen World, awesome. See you guys have such amazing history. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mary is right. It does seem to come with a price, too much blood spilled.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. When you have, you know, and we're talking about a battle that raged for 3 days, and we're talking about deaths in the thousands. wounded in the thousands, and a lot of those, like I said, probably didn't make it through amputations. So a lot more of them probably died. You know, and you got to picture how horrific that would have been. You know, what to be ripped apart by musket balls and be laying there with no source of help and just screaming in agony. You know, until you died.
Yeah, you just left there to die.
You know, I mean, there's way too much anguish that went on for there not to be, you know, spirits left behind, you know, still there, still fighting, still dying every day. Well, I don't know about every day. I would assume that stuff like that would like replay itself on the dates that it happened.
Oh yeah.
You know, so July 3rd of this year, it may replay itself. I think July 3rd was the first day, was it?
Yeah, I believe so.
So like July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I would imagine it'll replay itself. There'll be, you know, the battle will be going on. So to everybody in the chat room, we appreciate all you guys. Couldn't do a show without you. I hope you enjoyed it. Lots of good information, and I love Gettysburg. And as I said before, I'll say again, if the good Lord's willing and the creeks don't rise, I'm going to get there one of these days. Having said that, we will say goodnight and hope to see you guys.
We got the 11th, April 11th.
On the 11th of April. What do we have on 11th of April?
I haven't decided which show I want to do yet on Beyond the Grave, but I will get to that and get it out there for everybody.
Yes. Also keep in mind, next show is Christina's Beyond the Grave, which, of course, I will be co-hosting with her. But it's all her. You know what I'm saying? This is her thing. How's that song go? It's your thing. Yeah. All her. I love this. I love this stuff, you guys. Margaret Kriglow, great show. Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah, thank you everyone in chat. You guys have been great.
Okay. And as I said, I was going to shut this thing down. So we will see all you guys on the 11th. Be there or be square.
Good night, everybody.
Night, y'all.